So today I'm here to speak on a topic what is called as role of advanced formulation strategies from drug discovery to proof of concept. So as I said initially, like if you look into the drug research, which involves drug discovery and drug development, it's nothing but like what the game we play. It is like snakes and ladders. So everybody know the game of the snakes and ladders where we are going to play, and all the gamers who are involved in the game, they are going to move from one step to the next step. But as you see in the snakes and ladders, every time we move on to the ladder, there are some hurdles, you can say, in the form of a snakes here. But the same thing we are going to face in the drug research, which involves drug discovery and drug development. At one or the other stages, we are going to have the hurdles, and which makes us to move again to the starting step, recognize what are the hurdles, and then go with the next step. So before I go into this particular drug research, drug development, and drug drug discovery, I'm going to tell what is a drug. Of course, everyone know what is a drug. A drug is a chemical substance that is used to prevent or cure disease in humans, animals, and plants. And whenever we are going to come with a new drug, we always think that we need to have a ideal drug. Of course, as an individual also, every time we expect that we need to be an ideal individual. So there need to be some certain qualities which makes us ideal. So what is an ideal drug? An ideal drug is the one which is going to cure all patients. All patients in the sense, the patients who are in all the age groups need to be cured with the same drug, and the drug which we want to take, it should be administered by oral route, because we feel that oral route of administration is the best route which is going to help the patients also. Okay, so hence we want to see that whatever the drug we discover, develop, it should be administered by oral route, since it is going to give a lot of patient complaints. And the drug need to have high oral bioavailability. As you know, oral bioavailability is nothing but it is the amount of the drug that reaches the systemic circulation. So whenever we take a drug, that particular drug, it need to give high oral bioavailability. When the bioavailability is more, we say that the drug that entered into the systemic circulation is very high, and it is going to show its therapeutic effects at the site of action. Thereby we can reduce the symptoms whatever we are going to have. And that particular drug need to have appropriate pharmacokinetics for disease. Pharmacokinetic parameters are nothing but it is the ADME of the drug. That is when the drug is administered orally, either to the animals or to the humans. Here, it need to have an appropriate pharmacokinetics in terms of AUC, area under the curve, maximum Cmax concentration, or it need to have a Tmax, a early T half. When the drug is administered by oral route of administration, it should have less toxic effects, like this. And whatever the pharmacokinetics we have, it should be same in all the patients. Say for example, if a drug is taken by two different individuals in the same age group of 25 to 30, so one person is showing a very good pharmacokinetics, and other person it is not the same. So there may be a decrease in the Cmax or AUC or whatever. So
Excuse
that,
me, ma'am.
yeah, please.
Ma'am,
Yeah.
ma'am, you're not scrolling the slides, I think so. It's not moving. Only the introduction part is visible for us.
So I'm telling about you the ideal drug. Can you see that particular?
Okay. No, madam. Only the introduction slide is there, no? Role of advanced. That one is visible for us. No other slides are visible.
1 minute. Okay.
Yeah, okay, ma'am. Ideal drugs.
Yeah. Can you see the ideal drugs?
Yeah, ma'am. Now
Okay.
it is. Okay,
Okay.
okay, ma'am. Okay.
Shall I go to this particular individual slide like this? Can you see this slide like this when I'm going for the slideshow?
Okay, ma'am. Okay, okay,
One
ma'am.
minute.
But it is not clearly visible. I think students may not follow you. If you show the slide
Actually,
fully,
it
yeah,
is not. It is. Is it clear to you right now? Can you see the
yeah,
slides?
yeah, ma'am. Yeah, ma'am.
Can you
Oh,
see now?
okay. Yeah, ma'am. It is clear for us.
Okay. So the drug should have the same pharmacokinetics in all the patient, and a single one dose of the drug should be available in the counter, which we call it as the over the counter. And that particular ideal drug is the one where we think that the drug does not have any drug-drug interactions, and it should have a large safety margin, should be very high. But why do we need new drugs? Can you see this particular heading? Yeah. So we need new drugs because every time we are going to come always with the new diseases. So what we call this condition as unmet medical need. And what is a new medical condition now which we are currently facing? It is nothing but the COVID-19. So every time we are the humans or the animals or whatever it is, we are coming with the new diseases. So for the new diseases, we always need to have a new medicine which can treat that particular condition. Not only the new disease, and sometimes whatever the drugs which are already discovered, already there in the market, but they have low efficacy. Efficacy is very less. The conditions like dementia and cancer, you know that the efficacy is very less. Therefore, always we try to come up with new type of medicines, and we want to reduce even the side effects of the existing drugs also. If you take into the antidepressant and antipsychotic drugs, these particular drugs, they have lot of side effects. Instead of the benefits, the side effects are very high. So hence we always want to reduce the side effects, and we need to even reduce the cost of that particular therapy also. As in the case of Alzheimer's disease and spinal injury, the cost of the medication is very high because Alzheimer's is a condition which once it affects the particular individual, he has to take the medicine for longer duration. So but the cost of the therapy is very high. So therefore we need to come with a new medicine where we can reduce the cost. And if you look into the treatment by interleukins, which are proteins, protein based treatment, the cost is very high. And even if you look from a pharmaceutical industry point of view, they want to sustain this particular industry because since they are going to use or involve a lot of money every time, so always they want to sustain this particular industrial activity. Therefore, they come with a new drug. And you know, of course, the patent expiry. Once the patent expired, that the people are going to come, the industries are going to come with many generic medicines. So therefore, we need to come with a new drug. So now here comes what is called as a drug discovery disciplines. As I said, drug discovery is a highly complex one, interdisciplinary. It's a unique multidisciplinary process, and which is going to lead us to the development of novel therapeutic agents, especially in the area of unmet medical conditions. Now, this is how your drug discovery is going to look like. So here, before I tell about all these things, as I said, this particular drug research, we broadly classify this drug research into two parts. The first one, it is called as a drug discovery or drug design. And the second part, it is called as drug development. Drug discovery is nothing but where you can see we are going to identify the disease, which is an unmet medical condition. And in that particular unmet medical condition, we are going to identify the target which we want to target. And for this particular target, we are going to now come up with the synthesis of new molecules which can be targeting this particular target. Now, how we are going to synthesize these particular molecules or the drug molecules? We are going to
Excuse me, ma'am. Ma'am, a small request. While you're saying, can you please move the slides now? Students are asking to move the slides.
1 minute.
Okay, ma'am. Okay, ma'am.
Now,
Issues in drug test.
can you see this
Okay.
particular slide?
Yeah, ma'am. Okay,
I
ma'am.
will keep the slideshow like this. Okay.
Okay, ma'am. Sure. Thank you.
As I said here, so drug discovery or drug design, where we have a disease first, which is called as unmet medical condition. For that particular disease, we are going to identify the targets, which we need to identify the target and characterize that particular target. Now, once we know the target, for that particular target, now we are going to synthesize a number of molecules. How we are going to synthesize the molecules? By using what is called as a computer-aided drug design and combinatorial chemistry. These two things we use, and we are going to synthesize a large thousands of molecules. And all those 1,000 molecules, 1,000 and 10,000 molecules, whatever we are going to synthesize, we are going to screen those molecules by using techniques called as HTS. HTS is high throughput screening techniques. These particular screening techniques helps us to come with a group of molecules which are called as hit molecules. Hit molecule is a molecule which has a pharmacological effect, but not all the hit molecules are able to have the same efficacy towards the target. So therefore, from 10,000 molecule, now we come to some 100 hit molecules. Now from those particular 100 hit molecules, now we come to some 50 molecules which are called as lead molecules. A lead molecule is nothing but it is a a new chemical which is a very good potential, which can be developed into a new drug, but which has beneficial effect. At the same time, it has some side effects. So we take this particular lead molecule which has the beneficial effect but some less some toxic effects or side effects, where we again modify these particular lead molecules to make them as a clinical candidates. Clinical candidates in the sense which are going to show some pharmacological effects. Okay, so those particular clinical candidates all the participants understand this particular concept. Now, once you have this particular drug molecule in your drug discovery process, we need to even study the physicochemical characteristics of this particular drug molecule. We need to study the physicochemical characteristic of this particular drug molecule. So what are the physicochemical properties of the particular drug molecule? Physicochemical properties of the drug molecule, normally we also call it as the biopharmaceutical characteristics of the particular drug molecule, which involves the solubility of the drug molecule, the lipophilicity of the drug molecule. Okay, so this particular solubility and slash permeability or lipophilicity is the physicochemical properties of the drug molecule. So if the drug has a very good solubility and permeability, and then only we can expect the drug to have a very good absorbability. Okay, so but as I said, there are some issues in our drug discovery. What are those issues? Number one is that whatever the hits and lead molecules we synthesize, we need to find out whether it is druggable to the target or not. Fine, if it is druggable, it is going to the target, it binds to the target and show its effect. But does it develop any resistance? Yes, if it develops, how long it is going to work there? That is the second issue we have. And the third issue what we have in the drug discovery, as I already said, is the delivery. Because most of the drugs need to be administered by oral route. As I said, it is the route which is at the same time, it should not
Yes, sir.
So
Ma'am,
these are, yes, please.
your voice is breaking out, madam. Just keep your mouth near your mouth.
Okay, okay. Can you hear me right now?
Yeah, ma'am. Yeah, ma'am.
Okay,
Thank
yeah, yeah.
you.
You
Okay,
can
yeah,
tell me where you're lacking behind. That's not an
yeah.
issue. Okay,
Okay,
right.
thank you. Ma'am.
I'm just increasing the, right? Is it audible?
Yeah, ma'am.
Yes,
Clear.
fine. So these are the issues in our drug discovery. Okay, the issues is number one is that we need to think whether it is a lead molecule or not. If it is a lead, it is a druggable, because if it is a druggable, then only it is a drug-like molecule and it should not develop any resistance. It should be given by oral route of administration. Solubility should be very high. It should not undergo metabolism. It should have less toxicity. But all the drug molecules, whatever we synthesize, cannot have all these ideal properties. Therefore, these are the issues in our drug discovery. Okay. Now, if you look into this particular process of drug discovery and drug development, I already told you target, identification, validation, hit finding, lead optimization, all these things come under drug discovery. Now, what comes in drug development? Drug development includes preclinical studies and clinical studies. Now, what are preclinical studies? Preclinical studies are the studies which are done in animal species. We have various rodents and non-rodent species in which we perform the preclinical studies, where we are going to assess the safety and efficacy of the particular druggable molecule. Because end of the day, Out of those 10,000 molecules, whatever we are going to synthesize by using our computer-aided drug design as well as combinatorial chemistry, we finally land only into few molecules, maybe a half dozen molecules, which will enter into the preclinical studies. So preclinical studies, what we are going to do? The studies where the drug is administered by different routes into the animals like rats, mice, guinea pig, and at different time points, we collect the blood sample from the retroorbital or through the tail of that particular animal, and then look into the pharmacokinetics of the animal and look into the toxicity, carcinogenicity of that particular drug molecule in those particular animal species. Now, when we think that the pharmacokinetics of the particular drug are good, it is not showing any carcinogenic effect, not toxicity effect, then it enters into the next stage, which is called as clinical trials. Now, here in the clinical trials, everybody know that clinical trials means it is a phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and phase 4. But of course, we do have a one more phase, which is called as phase 0, in fact. Okay, so what is phase 0? Phase 0 is nothing but it is called as proof of concept. I have written it as POC. POC is nothing but it is proof of concept. So in the proof of concept, now what the FDA is telling, what is FDA? It is a Federal Drug Administration. What it is suggesting us is before you test the drug molecule in individual. So this is than 10 members, 10 member. So that means we first do the clinical trials in less than 10 members, and we ourselves think that it is safe. Then we go phase 1, phase 2, 3, followed by and post-marketing activities. Now, fine. So these are all what is called as drug research, drug discovery, and drug development. But I was telling, being a pharmaceutics person, we should know what are the biopharmaceutical hurdles we have in the drug development. Okay, because as I said, when we are going to come with a drug molecule, the main problem of the drug molecule is that it will have poor solubility and poor permeability. So therefore, as a biopharmaceutics person or as a pharmacokinetic, as a pharmaceutics person, we need to know what are the various biopharmaceutical hurdles we have in the drug development. So this particular system which helps us to understand the various biopharmaceutical hurdles is this LADBER system, LADBER. So what does the LADBER stand for? L stands for liberation of the drug. Okay, of the drug. But here we have a new terminology for the drug, that is, before the drug is absorbed, distributed, metabolized, and excreted, it should undergo liberation. So this new system is called as LADMER system. So where L stands for liberation. So that means before the drug is absorbed, it has to liberate. Now, when the drug is getting liberated, during the process of liberation, we have the biopharmaceutical hurdle, that is poor solubility. Now, as you know, if the drug is poorly soluble, and depending upon the solubility and permeability, we are going to classify the drugs as per our biopharmaceutical classification system, which is called as BCS classification. So what does the BCS stand for? Biopharmaceutical classification. And according to the biopharmaceutical classification system, the drugs are classified into 4 types: class 1, class 2, class 3, and class 4. Okay, now what is class 1? Class 1 drugs are nothing but where the solubility and permeability is very high. So that means when the drug is given by oral route of administration, we don't have an issue of solubility and the permeability. And the drug, when the drug is given, it undergoes solubility. So it is going to dissolve, and it doesn't have any dissolution as the rate limiting step, nor the permeability as the rate limiting step. And finally, it enters into the systemic circulation and the drug shows high bioavailability. So therefore, class 1 drugs does not have any problem. The main problem comes with class 2, class 3, and class 4. Okay. Now, if you look into the poor solubility, now what is? Let me tell what is class two. Class two is high permeability and low low permeability but high solubility. And class 4 are the drugs which in which way we see the solubility and permeability is very low. Okay, so if you look into the poor solubility, mainly the class 2 and class 4 drugs will come here. So therefore, we have an approach here to overcome this particular hurdle, which is called as formulation approach and by chemical modification approach. I will tell you in the next slides what is formulation approach. Fine. There is no issue with the solubility, therefore the drug undergoes liberation. But once the drug undergoes liberation also, the drug may have an hurdle by chemical degradation or enzymatic degradation or poor solubility as in hurdle. So therefore, how do you overcome these particular hurdles? And if you look into the chemical degradation and enzymatic degradation, it is faced by all the classes of the drug. So there is no distinction between class 1, class 2, class 3, class 4. All the 4 classes of the drug, they can undergo chemical degradation or enzymatic degradation. Therefore, how to overcome this particular hurdle? So we need to use some formulation approach or a chemical modification approach or use some enzymes to inhibit this particular degradation. And at the same time, if the drug is going to have a poor permeability, which is nothing but permeability promoters, which are going to increase the permeability of the drug. At the same time, do some chemical modification of the particular drug, whereby we can increase the permeability of the drug. And these are the hurdles we have. Fine, the drug does not have any problem with the liberation. It is belonging to class 1. There is no degradation. There is no permeability issue, and it is undergoing absorption. But when the drug is undergoing absorption also, the problem is that it has first pass metabolism. Before it is distributed, before it undergoes here, metabolized and the response is shown, it undergoes what is called as first pass metabolism. And first pass metabolism is seen with all the BCS classes of the drug. So then what is the alternate thing we need to understand here during the drug development is that, yes, we can't administer drug by oral route of administration. If you want to administer, you think to modify this particular system in such a way that the drug does not undergo first pass metabolism, or look for an alternate route other than the oral route, or use a prodrug approach. Okay, so finally, so you think that the drug does not undergo first pass metabolism means, okay, fine, it undergoes distribution, metabolism, excretion, and finally it is going to show your pharmacodynamic. So understand what are the biopharmaceutical hurdles we have in our drug development. I hope all of you have understood this particular concept. Now, so this is what you can see. This is a data which I have collected from the US FDA site, where they say that 60% of the respondents have experienced. Who are the respondents? They are experiencing formulation issues, and that's the main cause. It is leading a failure in the drug development. And what is that particular 60% of the issues that is causing a failure in the drug development is either with the soluble stability of the drug, solubility of the drug, and bioavailability. If you look into this particular figure, you can see these are the important formulation challenges which the company scientists are facing. So that means we need to address it. Thereby we understand that 40 to 60% and even more number of the drugs are belonging to BCS class 2. So what is the BCS class 2 drugs? Which have low solubility and high permeability, and the remaining 20 to 30% is with the class 4 drugs. So therefore, we need to address this challenge in such a way that we can improve the solubility and permeability, we can enhance the bioavailability, we can reduce the fast phase variability. I will tell in the, or let me complete here itself. So what do you mean by fast fed variability? Fast fed variability means, say for example, a drug, if you look into the griseofulvin, normally the doctor or the pharmacist suggests us to take the drug with a liquid or with the meals. So why they say? Because the drug has high bioavailability when it is taken with meal, especially which is containing high fats. Okay, so now here the condition is that yes, we should not have any fast feed variability. Because of this fast feed variability, most of the anti-cancer drugs are not showing the bioavailability as it is proposed or it is supposed to give the bioavailability. So therefore, we need to address this particular challenge of fast feed variability. At the same time, we need to reduce the dose of the drug. Why we should reduce? This is a very big challenge because, as you know, especially in conditions with where we are going to use some antidepressant drugs, anti-anxiolytic drugs, especially to the CNS, the dose of the drug is very high. When the dose of the drug is very high, the side effects are very more. So therefore, we need to address this particular problem of dose. Therefore, we need to have a system or a formulation strategy which helps us to improve the solubility, enhance the bioavailability, reduce the fast food variability, at the same time reduce the dose of the drug. Now here comes the various advanced and used to address the above issues of solubility, permeability, bioavailability, fast variability, and where we can reduce the dose of the drug. So here we are going to classify this particular advanced and novel drug delivery systems into three types: polymeric, micro, and nanoparticle system; lipidic systems, where we are going to use some lipids, and under the lipidic system, we call them as with under various names like self-nanomemsifying drug delivery system, or solid lipid nanoparticles, microemulsions, and nanoemulsions. All these things comes under lipidic systems. And we have one more system which is called as nanosuspension or nanocrystal systems. So generally, we are going to classify our advanced and novel drug delivery systems into these three categories. Now here, I'm going to tell you about, explain you about a in-depth case study where we have used nanosuspension as an approach for improving the, for enhancing the solubility, or to improve the solubility and enhance the permeability of the drug. So this is a case study which I want to discuss with you guys. So this is called as formulation and evaluation of nanosuspension for the selected drug in the treatment of osteoporosis. Now, before I go into this particular nanosuspension, osteoporosis is one of the top 5 non-communicable diseases of aging. If you look into the non-communicable diseases includes like your heart attacks, heart problems, obesity, diabetes, and osteoporosis. Osteoporosis is one such non-communicable disease, and it is in the top 5 non-communicable diseases of aging, where the mortality. So what do you mean by osteoporosis? How you are going to define osteoporosis? Osteoporosis is a systemic disease which is characterized by low bone mass. The bone mass is very low, and there is a microarchitectural deterioration of the bone. The bone is undergoing the deterioration, and thereby the bone is going to have a bone fragility. Fragility is easily, it can be breakable, and thereby there are high chances of fracture of the bone. And you can see in this particular osteoporosis, the rate of bone resorption is greater than rate of bone formation. The bone formation is less, but whereas the breakage of the bone is more. That's the thing. What we say is the loss of bone mass occurs when the rate of bone resorption is greater than the bone formation. Now, this is how a healthy bone is going to look, and this is how your osteoporotic bone is going to look like. If you look into the healthy bone, you can see that the architecture of this particular bone tissue is but in osteoporotic bone, you can see that the architecture is not uniform. There are breaks in this particular architecture of the bone. Between this bone tissue is increased. So when the gaps between the bone tissue is increased, the chances for the fracture is very high. Okay, so how you are going to identify this particular medical condition? You can see the fractures may be followed by full recovery or by chronic pain or disability, and finally it may even lead to death also. So therefore, we should not take osteoporosis as a simple condition, because it is finally it may even lead to death also. Chronic pain is a severe one. Okay. Of course, there are n number of drugs which are there in the present market, but all those particular drugs which are there in the market, they have their own side effects or problems. So therefore, there is a need for novel therapy, safety and efficacy need to be increased. So what are the problems which are associated with the current osteoporotic drug? Number one is that no symptomatic relief. Say, for example, I'm using some NSAIDs, I'm using some steroids. Every day I have to use them. But you know that if those particular NSAIDs and steroids are taken for a longer time, they need to be used for long-term therapy. And when we are going to use for long-term therapy, it has side effects. We can see breast cancer, endometrial cancer, ovarian cancer. All these things are there, especially with hormone replacement therapy. Okay, and the drug may have poor bioavailability, cost is very high. Patient complains every day. You need to ask the patient to take the half-life of the drug. If the half-life of the drug is less than 4 hours or the 6 hours, the drug has to be taken for 3 times or 4 times a day. Okay, so these are the problems which are associated with the of some new drugs which are available in natural source. So here comes what is called as natural therapy. So what is natural therapy? Natural therapy are nothing but where you going to use some plant-based substances which have the property of acting as an antioxidant, anti-inflammatory, and which has some biochemical effects in diseases like cancer, Alzheimer's, cardiovascular systems. Okay, so here one such particular natural compound which has been identified is the flavonoids. So these particular flavonoid may be a solution for our bone condition of osteoporotic. So what are these particular flavonoids? These are plant secondary metabolites with polyphenolic structures, and these are mainly available in fruits, vegetables, as well as in beverages. And all these plant secondary metabolites with polyphenolic structure are known to be useful for a condition of osteoporosis. This is a mechanism how it is going to help us. It is going to reduce the ROS levels, and you can see it is going to help in the bone resorption, and is going to increase osteoclast, that is bone cells are morely produced and bone mineral density is increased here. But so this is how the flavor you can see they drives or differentiate the osteoclast differentiation. They are going to reduce the deoxyoxygen species. They increases the signaling to the estrogen receptors, that are ER2, ER beta receptors, and helps in the condition of osteoporosis. But of course, every coin has its own advantages and disadvantages. So now what are the disadvantages of this particular flavonoids? So there are some problems related with the oral bioavailability of this particular flavonoids, because the flavonoids, most of the flavonoids belongs to BCS class 2 drugs. So as you know, BCS class 2 drugs, they have limited water solubility. The molecular weight is very high, poor bioavailability also, because some of the drugs even may belongs to BCS class 4 also, therefore poor bioavailability, instability. They undergo extensive first pass effect. Instability, they are highly unstable in gastric pH as well as colonal pH. So instability where the drug undergoes degradation, and even the drug undergoes metabolism by microflora in the gut, and thereby it has poor absorption, and sometimes it may even show active efflux mechanism. Efflux means whenever the drug goes to any tissue, the tissue will not outside, because the tissue is not allowing the drug molecule to go inside. That is what is called as efflux mechanism. The oral bioavailability of flavonoids. Okay, now therefore what we have to use now, we need to use the nanotechnology. So we need to use technology where in the form of nanoparticles, it will help us to enhance the solubility and bioavailability. It even protects the drug from physical and chemical stability issues. We can even reduce the dose of the drug. When the dose of the drug is reduced, the side effects can be reduced. And as I said, in the form of a nanoparticles, the drug increases proliferation. Osteoblast proliferation in the sense the bone matrix formation is increased. This is what is called as osteoblast effect. Okay, bone formation is increased here, and thereby it also decreases the osteoclast proliferation. Clast in the sense which removes the bone tissues by removing the bone mineral matrix of the bone. Okay, so clast is nothing but where we say that the collagen of the bone is dissolved. Blast is the one way it is responsible. Okay, now here. So how do we increase the oral bioavailability? As I said, we should use a nanoparticle approach. So what is one particular approach? Nanosuspension. Nanosuspension as an approach will definitely address all the issues of this particular flavonoids. We can increase the solubility, permeability, and this particular nanosuspension approach, it can be taken in the pilot scale, at the lab scale, as well as in the pilot scale and industry scale, easy to scale up for large scale production. And this approach is widely used for poorly soluble drugs, especially for physical stability. It reduces the toxicity, increases the safety. Safety in the sense we don't have any contamination of this particular approach. And at the same time, we can incorporate whatever the nanosuspension we get into different types of dosage forms. We can make it as a tablet or as a powder, or you can dissolve in a double distill or triple distill water and use it for injection. And even this particular nanosuspension approach is also used for ocular route of administration also. For any of these ocular conditions, it can be used. And the main advantage is that it is going to increase your bioavailability. And now this is one of the approach most of the companies, pharma companies, are working with it. And based approaches, because these are easily scalable approach. So what is in nanosuspension? Nanosuspension, these are called as carrier-free submicron colloidal dispersions of pure drug particles. That means it is a carrier-free. We are not using any carriers. What we use is stabilizer. So that means here the drug particles are stabilized by surfactant molecules. And the other name what we call this nanosuspension is, we also call it as a nanocrystals. And what is the particle size of this nanosuspension or nanocrystal? It is going to range from 10 to 1000 nanometers. And we have different types of surfactants which can be used for preparing a nanosuspension. So these nanosuspension can be prepared by using an anionic surfactants, a polymeric surfactants. So if you look into the non-ionic surfactants like polysorbates, tocopherol based succinates, this is called as vitamin E TPGS. These are used as non-ionic surfactant. Sodium glucidyl sulfate is used as ionic surfactant. And polymeric stabilizers like your hydroxypropyl methyl cellulose, HPMC, hydroxypropyl cellulose, methyl cellulose, hydroxyethyl cellulose, polyvinyl pyrrolidones, PVPs. These are used as polymeric stabilizers. Why we use mainly the polymeric stabilizers and this ionic and this, because they are generally regarded as GRAS grade. What do you mean by GRAS? This is called as generally regarded as safe excipient. The pharmacist or the pharmaceutical scientist or these researchers generally used the GRAS grade excipients, which are recommended by the various authorities. And one more excipients nowadays, it is available under the brand name. It is nothing but it is a graft polymer, which is based on polyvinyl acetate. This is also commonly used now. Apart from this, we also use poloxamers. Poloxamers, which are based on polypropylene oxides and polyethylene oxide chains. Poloxamers, which are also called as pluronics. They are available on the trade name of pluronics. These are also used as polymeric stabilizers. So here we have seen what is a nanosuspension. A nanosuspension is a category by a stabilizer, and here the particle size is going to range from 10 to 1000 nanometers, and we are going to prepare this particular nanosuspension by any of these particular surfactants. Yeah. Any problem?
No, ma'am.
Yeah. Now, if you look into the market, these are the drugs which are approved in the form of nanocrystals and nano suspensions, which are approved and already there in the market. You can see here, microcrystal, Eli Lilly, it is used to, this is called as olanzapine. You can see other drugs like aripiprazole, palperidone, buprenorphine, soybean oil, all these drugs, even fish oil, it is also available in the form of a lipid as a emulsion based approaches. So these are already available in the market. Now, how do you formulate this particular nanosuspension? So everybody think, yes, you have suggested that nanosuspension is an approach. Fine. As a nanosuspension, we can use two types of approaches. These are called as top-down techniques and bottom-up techniques. Top-down small particles. That means from the top, we are reducing the size of the drug. Okay. So how we are going to reduce the size of the drug? By using various techniques like media milling, high pressure homogenizer, or high speed homogenizer. So here these approaches are called as top-down approaches, which are going to involve high energy. They involve high energy. Advantages and disadvantages. There are some drawbacks. Here, it mainly they may undergo chemical degradation or even contamination. Metal contamination is nothing but it is mainly seen with media milling. Media milling is nothing but which is called as a ball milling technique. So you know, you have studied in your pharmaceutical engineering. Ball milling technique is the one where it consisting of a mill with a number of balls. So all these balls are mainly made up of a stainless steel balls or a ceramic balls or zirconium balls. So during this particular milling process, sometimes the ball is going to the ball is going to erode and it may contaminate your product. Okay. Now the second bottom-up approaches are nothing but these approaches. It involves the addition of a water-miscible organic solution of the drug to non-solvent water. What do you mean by bottom-up approaches? Bottom-up approaches is nothing but it involves addition of water-miscible solvent, water-miscible organic solvent. Take your organic solvent containing the drug, add it to a water, which is nothing but non-solvent water, and mix it. Okay. So when we mix it, what happens? This particular organic solvent, it is getting rapidly mixed with your non-solvent. It dilutes. Your organic solvent is highly diluted because of higher supersaturation. It leads to spontaneous nucleation followed by precipitation of that particular drug molecule. So that means when we are going to add an organic solvent drug to a non-solvent, this is what called as bottom-up techniques. And these bottom-up techniques, it involves various approaches like solvent precipitation technique, emulsion solvent evaporation technique. We don't require any sophisticated equipment. What we simply require is only a stirrer, a pipette to add your organic solvent, less expensive. And here, whatever the size we get, they are in uniform size range. But in case of a top-down approaches, the size is going to range from 10 nanometers to 500 or even up to 1000 nanometers. It is going to have varied size distribution, but here that's not the case. Okay. Now, here the drug what we have taken for our study is naringenin. Naringenin, as I was telling, it is a flavonoid. So this is a very good molecule. It was solubility is, it belongs to BCS class 2 drug. And if you look into the pharmacokinetic parameters, oral bioavailability is very less. It is 5.81. And it even metabolism also, it undergoes, you can see here, it undergoes enterohepatic conjugation metabolism, it undergoes, and the solubility is very less. Molecular weight is also very high. Okay, so taking this particular, you have to select the drug based upon the physicochemical properties of the drug, because we need to select an approach which is going to suit that particular drug. So here, solubility is very low and oral bioavailability is very less. Okay, now this is a tree which is called as, so aware in fact, but if you are not aware, you can just look into this particular decision tree. Decision tree is the one which helps you to select the proper formulation approach. How to select the formulation approach? Most of you will be thinking, how I need to start. So here you can see start. What do you mean by start? Say you have a drug. Okay. If the drug can form a salt, yes, if you say yes, my drug can form a salt, then you make it as a water soluble salt. Method and say that your drug solubility is increased, but your drug is not soluble, it cannot form salt, then you say no. If it is no, the next thing what you have to consider apart from the solubility is log P. What is log P? Log P is the one which will tell you about the lipophilicity of the drug. It will tell you about the permeability of the drug. Yes, if the log P is low and high, so the next the drug molecule is melting point of the drug, because this is one of the criteria which you have to consider. If the melting point of the drug is very high, high in the sense more than 150 or 160 here, so if the melting point is high, if the dose of the drug is very high, we have two approaches to select. Number one, complexation as an approach, where you use cyclodextrins, molodextrins, and if the addictive, it can go with the inclusion complexes. But no, if the drug does not form a molecular additive, molecular shape, it doesn't form, it doesn't fit in this particular inclusion complex into your cyclodextrins, then you take the approach of nanosuspension. So when do you come to nanosuspension? Say the drug is having poor solubility, it cannot form a salt, consider the if the drug is very high, and if the dose is very high and it is not going to form an inclusion complex, then you should look for an approach called nanosuspension. But here, if the melting point is low, you can use simple techniques like your co-solvents, miscellaneous strategy to improve your solubility and permeability. So this is a decision tree which is published in Nature Review. We'll go into that particular article also. Okay. So this is an overview of your this particular naringenin, where we want to overcome the delivery challenges of naringenin, like solubility, first pass metabolism, and inadequate drug absorption, bioavailability and stability issues are so what are the study how it should be carried on. Now, therefore, what are our objectives? Study objectives is formulation and optimization, characterization of the prepared nanosuspension, in vitro dissolution study. After the in vitro dissolution study, we also want to study permeability study also, because without knowing the permeability study, we don't know how much is the drug is getting permeated into the cell culture studies on MG63 cell lines, and even anti-osteoporotic activity we have done in overectomized. Now, coming to this particular approach, as I said, you can have five approaches. Approaches, top-down approaches. Top-down approaches are we are going to size high high pressure homogenizer. And the second approach, as I said, it is bottom-up approach, which is the one which is called as anti-solvent precipitation method. So in this particular anti-solvent method, you take your drug, take this particular drug solution dissolved in organic solvent into a syringe and add it rapidly to an anti-solvent system. What is stabilizer? So you rapidly add your drug dissolved in organic solvent using a syringe into a anti-solvent system containing the stabilizer. When you're going to so you under dilution, because we have a large amount of anti-solvent system, there is a spontaneous nucleation will takes place, and during this particular spontaneous nucleation, the drug particles are getting coated with your stabilizer. And after adding, we are also going to subject it to propsonicator. Propsonicator, because nucleation, therefore we subject it to sonication under ice cold conditions for specified period of time, followed by evaporation of the solvent on a magnetic stirrer. Okay, because on the solvent and ensure that the total organic solvent is completely evaporated, which leads to the formation of a nanosuspension. And to make this particular nanosuspension to stay for longer duration of time, so that we can characterize that, you subject it to freeze drying using a freeze dryer. So thereby you get what is called as a free dry nanosuspension. So this is a simple technique which can be used for preparing your nanosuspension. How you are going to prepare a nanosuspension is you dissolve your using ice cold condition, followed by placing on a magnetic stirrer for solvent evaporation, which leads to the formation of a nanosuspension. Okay, now this is our optimized nanosuspension. Yes, for preparing a nanosuspension, it is not as simple as the need to polymeric stabilizers, ionic stabilizers, non-ionic stabilizers. So you have to screen your stabilizers. And how do you screen these stabilizers? We need to stabilize the recommended concentration. So you have to go through the literature and find out what is the concentration range we can use that particular stabilizers. Either I can use it from 1 to 10% or 0.1 to 10% weight by volume basis. So all this literature screen the stabilizer nanosuspension. And you can see a stable nanosuspension is the one which is going to look like a translucent system. If it is not a stable nanosuspension, what will happen? All your drug will be settled at the bottom, and then there may be settling, and there may be settling even after 1 week or 15 days. Therefore, during this particular optimization study, you have to even look into the physical stability of the system, look for the particle size, of the system for 50, after 15 days and 1 month, and see that whether it is giving you a stable nano suspension or not. Now, in this current particular study where we have worked with narengery, and use this is responsibility. So, 0.5%. So, stable nano suspension using PVP K90 as a stabilizer. Now, during this particular process of selecting the optimized nano suspension also, you can even optimized for drug concentration also. What is the drug concentration? In this particular case, it is 30 mg per ml. 30 mg per ml of the organic. The drug particle size is uniform. It is less than 200 to 300 nanometers. Zeta potential is good, and your drug particles will not settle. That particular system is called as a stable nano suspension. And you can also optimize your solvent to anti gave you a stable nano suspension. And as I said in the previous method here, we are using sonication time. So this particular sonication can optimize it. Time of 8 is going to be very good nano suspension. So that's how you can optimize the drug concentration. Before drug concentration, first you have to optimize your stabilizer. You can use individual stabilizers. You can use combination stabilizers. Select a very good stabilizer. Then select your sonication time, and then select your drug concentration as well as solvent to anti-solvent ratio. Now this is the characterization. So you have to remember one thing, that whenever you are going to prepare any system, formulation is one thing and its characterization and evaluation is the second part, which is very important. So here we have characterized for particle size by using Malloran zeta sizer, and we found that the optimized nano suspension is having a particle size of 170 nanometers with a very good transfer. This is what is called as a polydispersity index. That means the particles are in the same size range. So if the polydispersity index is less than, index is less than 0.3, then I say it is a very good system, because all the particles are in the a very narrow and range. But if the polydispersity index is greater than 0.3, then I don't call it as a homogeneous system. I call it as a heterogeneous system. That means the particle size is ranging from maybe 10 nanometers to 1000 or 10,000. Therefore, you will have a big graph like this, a plot, rheogram plot like this. Zeta potential normally tells about the stability of the system. Here it has minus 14.6, considering this as a good. So you can see the quality, result quality says it is a very good one. So we got a very stable system here. Now, these are the pictures of scanning electron microscopy. You can see the scanning electron microscopy. I'm showing you 4 pictures. This is the naringenin crystal. You can see the crystals are in cubic and they're not in millimicron. They are in microns. You can see they are in microns, very, very big crystals. And these are the needle-like crystals which are formed when the drug is crystallized to ethanol. That means when you add ethanol to the drug, and then precipitate with water, you are getting a needle-like structures. But after preparing a nano suspension and freeze drying that, you can see this is optimized when after air drying, you can see small particles which are in nano range. So these are the The particles are in nanoray, which can be confirmed by only scanning electron microscopy system. But when it comes to the microemulsions or the self-nanoemulsifying drug delivery systems, it is not STEM. We need to use STEM. What is STEM? It is called as transmission electron microscopy system. So transmission electron microscopy system need to be used for any emulsion-based system, which will tell you about the size and the morphology or topography of the system. Now, the next evaluation test which should be done is DSC. So what does the DSC stand for? Differential scanning colorimeter. Differential scanning colorimeter is one of the thermal analytical technique which will tell you about the endothermic and exothermic peaks of the drug. If you look at the drug, it will show you a peak at around 258 and below 260. And this is the peak which we get it for a PVPK 90, and these are the peaks for physical mixture. But in case of the formulation, we don't have any peak here. So what does this indicate? This indicates that in the formulation, the drug is at its molecular level in this particular stabilizer, and it is forming a matrix system. Thereby, we don't have any peak, drug peak in the formulation. And the drug is also converting to a little bit of amorphous system, because amorphous systems does not show any endothermic peak. So thereby, we say that the drug is converted to amorphous state, or it is at its molecular state embedded in the stabilizer. Now, this is what drug. A is the drug which has very sharp peaks, okay? But whereas the drug has less peaks. So here normally we count this particular XRD by taking the number of counts. The counts is taken into consideration for telling about the crystallinity of this particular drug. So if you see into this particular freeze-dried form of the drug, it is there are no sharp peaks. Okay, the number of the counts is less than 500, but here it is up to 1000. So which says that the drug is transformed or changed to amorphous state. Thereby, it has increased its solubility and bioavailability. It can increase. Okay, now this is the dissolution studies. Dissolution studies, as you know, once we come up with any formulation, either it is a tablet or a granule or a nanosuspension or an emulsion or a coated tablet, whatever it is, as a pharmaceutics person, we have to do the dissolution studies. So dissolution studies we have done in dissolution USP type 2 apparatus, which is called as a paddle apparatus, using 900 ml as the dissolution media. And what is the dissolution media we have used? Phosphate buffer saline, pH 7.4. Okay, so we have performed the dissolution up to 1.5 hour, 1 hour you can see, for plain drug, only the drug, as well as for nanosuspension. And you can see from the graph that more than 80% of the drug has been got dissolved in less than 15 minutes. You can see 42% of the post drug dissolved. And what could be the reason? The reason for this particular effect is because of nanosizing as per the Noyes-Whitney equation, which is used for say that because size, reduced size, 90% of the drug is dissolved at 1 hour. And even the PVP might have played a role in increasing the solubility, hence dissolution of the selected drug is also increased. Okay. Now, anytime you want to take this particular optimized formulation for further in vivo studies, you have to do what is called as stability studies. So stability studies you are going to do as per the ICH guidelines. As per ICH guidelines, we need to store our formulation at 3 different conditions: at room temperature, at refrigerated conditions, at accelerated conditions. We have done these studies up to 3 days on the 3 conditions, but increased from what is called as 120 to 160 nanometers, is stored at 28 degrees. At the same time, the particle size is increased from 118 to up to 138 when it is stored at 4 to 8 degrees. And similarly, the particle size also increased from 120 to 170 when it is stored at accelerated condition of 40 degrees. So that means we can say that as a nanosystem in a suspension state, it is stable for more than 15 days. Of course, it is also stable at 30 days in terms of physical stability, but only thing is there was an increase in particle state, particle size. Hence, we say that the stability studies, we can say that the system is stable as a suspension up to 15 days. But when we lyophilize, definitely it will be stable for more than 1 year also. Now, before going to what is called as in vivo studies, what is the other study which we have done is called as ex vivo non-everted gut sac technique as well as SPIP. First, let me tell you what is ex vivo. Ex vivo permeability. As I was telling you, we need to determine the permeability of this particular drug also through the intestine. How do we do that? So we can do that by taking the intestine of the rats. So collect the intestine of the rat and identify the different parts of the intestine of the rat as duodenum, jejunum. This or into that and do okay. So at regular time point of intervals, collect the sample, analyze for the drug content, and calculate what is called as apparent permeabilities. So we have calculated the apparent permeabilities in different parts of the intestine like duodenum, jejunum, ileum. And what we found is that there is a 4.8-fold increase in permeability in ileum as compared to jejunum and duodenum, especially for naringenin nanosuspension. Naringenin nanosuspension, if you compare the apparent permeability in for naringenin and naringenin nanosuspension, if you compare, increase how do we calculate the effective permeability? Means we are going to perform an experiment called as SPIP. What does the SPIP stand for? This is called as single pass intestinal permeability study. I repeat, SPIP stands for single pass intestinal permeability study. Okay, so what you are going to do in this particular technique means you are going to anesthesia after anesthetizing the animal. You are going to isolate, remove the intestine of the animal. Okay, and at the intestine part, you identify the two sections: one where you are going to give the inlet of the drug solution, and the other one for outlet of the drug solution. Okay, so you are going to give an infusion to the live animal. You are not going to kill the animal. This is a live animal. To the live animal, you are going to infuse the drug, and at periodic time interval, you collect the outlet of the drug and analyze for the drug content. Okay, at different time points. So what we found is that even the so that means even the permeability of the drug is also increased. Now, before going to what is called as a overrectomized and osteoporotic studies, as everyone knows, once we have an ethical committee approval, we have taken ethical committee approval and we have performed the in vivo pharmacokinetic study in Vista rats. Okay, so how you are going to do this? You try to keep the rats in the animal house under ice under AC conditions and see that the animals adjust to the condition. Maybe it may take 1 week or 10 days, and once the animals adjust to the conditions, so say for example tomorrow you want to start the experiment, today you keep the animals on fasting condition. Okay, so after keeping the animals to fasting condition, the next day you go to the animal house, you divide the animals into two groups. To one group of the animals, you administer plain drug, naringenin, which is prepared in as per the dose. Calculate for the animals which you are going to calculate from the human dose. Okay, so calculate your animal dose and give it to the animals. And at respective time points, what you have to do is that you have to collect, anesthetize the animals at every time and collect the blood from your retroorbital flux. So that means you are going to collect, do some puncturing to the eye needle using some capillary tubes and collect the blood. And whatever the blood you collect at the different time points, you try to collect the plasma, and this particular plasma you are going to treat with organic solvent, and then extract the drug into the organic solvent or into the mobile phase, and then inject that into the HPLC. And this particular HPLC you cannot directly inject also. First you have to do what is called as bioanalytical for the standard drug. Okay, so you have to take the standard drug and do give a calibration class you are going to HPLC method. So in the HPLC method, what you are going to do in simple analysis, you are going to take the drug, dissolve in the mobile phase, and different concentrations you take, and then develop a calibration curve. In the similar, here also you have to perform bioanalytical study and then get the calibration curve. So after developing the calibration curve, you have to do this particular points, and using any software, maybe like what is called as Vinolin software or Kinetica software, you can calculate the various pharmacokinetic parameters. So what are the parameters we have calculated here? AUC, area under the curve for 24 hours, Cmax, Tmax. We can also calculate the various other parameters like VD, half-life of the drug, all the other parameters you can calculate. Okay, so this is a graph for your graph of nanosuspension as compared to naringenin. So AUC has been increased by 2 folds. Okay. Now, you have MJ63 cell lines. MJ63 cell lines are nothing but these are osteosarcoma cell lines. So in the osteosarcoma cell lines, first, what we have to do is that we will use different concentrations and find out what is called as IC50. So you have to determine what is called as IC50. IC50 is the concentration where 50% of the cells are going to retain. So that is the concentration, that particular concentration you have to take. So where the cell viability you are going to determine, identify the IC50, and at that particular IC50 concentrations, we have done what is called as even engineering, and this is the negative control, and this is a blank nanosuspension. That means in case of a nanosuspension, the osteocalcin production is increased. So this is how we can prove that the formulation in the form of an naringenin nanosuspension increased the osteocalcin production as compared to naringenin. Okay, now the final study which we have done is called as osteoporotic study in vivo animals. Now this is how we have developed osteoporosis. So first you have to take your rat, anesthetize the rat, take a do a midline insertion, identify the midline, and of the rat stomach, and do a section here. After doing a section, you will slowly remove a part of the section outside and identify the ovaries. So what you have to do now, you have to cut these ovaries and then apply a suture here. Okay, so that means what we are doing, we are inducing osteoporosis. How we are inducing osteoporosis? You are removing the ovaries. When you remove the ovaries, since the hormones are not there, okay, estrogens will not be released, thereby osteoporosis will be induced in the animals. So remove those ovaries and using a surgical suture at the removed area of that particular ovaries, and then apply some what is called as ciprofloxacin drops, so that no recovery should be there. So once you remove that particular ovary, you apply this particular ciprofloxacin drops and keep the tissue back into the intestine and prepare and apply some sutures at the top. Okay, so this is how you are going to establish female, and this is done only in female rats. Okay, so once doing this particular surgery, removing the ovaries, okay, you have to keep the animals for 1 month. So during this particular 1 month period of time, what will happen? The osteoporosis will be induced in the animals, and you can measure from its blood as well as urine, also the various biochemical parameters and biochemical parameters and hematological parameters you will analyze it. And you can see that as compared to the control group, there are a reduced level of okay. Now, after 1 month of this particular surgery, you have to give the oral treatment for 2 months. So what are the 2 months treatment you have to give? So for one group, you have to administer the plain drug. To the other group, you have to administer the administer the drug for 2 months. So the total period of the study will be for 3 months. So exactly after 90 days, what you have to do, you have to remove the blood before sacrifice, collect the urine also, and then sacrifice the animals, collect the bones. Okay, because we need to study the osteoporosis, whether it is induced, after inducing also how much recovery is there in the animals. Okay, so whatever the bones we have collected the bones and we have taken for histopathology of the bone. Now, this is the histopathology of the particular bone. You can see histopathology sections of rat bone, which is taken, all these histopathological images are taken into 100x magnification. Now, this is what is called as sham group. Sham group in the sense where you have not done any surgery, it's just a control group. This is over-optimized control group. Sham group is the one Naloxone is used as a standard drug. Okay, and D is nothing but where plain drug is administered. E is the one where nanoengineered nanosuspension is given, and F is the one which is the blank nanosuspension also. Because normally during the studies, it is suggested, all the articles will suggest us to ease you, even you have to study about the blank formulation also. So what we found is that our naroengineered nanosuspension is restoring the bone in very similar to the Reloxi, which is used as a standard. But if you see, you can see in this particular B slide, you can see this is the gaps are more. There is no restoration of the bone because it is an over-optimized one. In case of the dime, yes, there is a little bit restoration, but restoration is not full. Okay, but in case of our nanosuspension, restoration is more. You can see more of the restoration is taking place, and it is very similar to that of the Reloxime, which is a standard. And in case of the blank nanosuspension, there is no restoration of the bone. So finally, what we can conclude from the histopathology is that in the form of a nanosuspension, the restoration of the bone is more, and it is very similar in terms of the standard drug. Hence, we finally conclude that nanosuspension is one of an advanced approach, which is a carrier-free drug delivery system, which is stabilized only by using a surfactant, and where we get the particles which are system is that it can be used for any route of administration. You can use it for ocular, you can even use it for nose to brain delivery also. You can administer your drug because nanosuspension we have administered through nasal, through nose to the brain also. So it is also reaching very high concentrations, very advanced drug delivery system which we can use is a simple and which can be done both at laboratory as well as at the pilot scale in the industry is a nanosuspension approach. So this completes my presentation.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you. Any questions anybody has, they can ask me.
Okay, ma'am. We'll unmute everyone. 2 seconds. Professor, students, those who have any questions, you can ask right now.
Shall I say stop share and so that I can see your faces and then ask any questions?
Yeah, okay, ma'am. Sure.
Yeah. Okay, where I am. Yeah. Anybody has any questions? So first of all, did you understood the topic or not?
Students,
Yeah.
so Professor, can you unmute them? Just a while, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Students, those who have any questions or doubts, you can clear now.
Please, anyone ask questions, please raise your hands.
They are saying that is very useful, informative presentation.
Okay, thank you.
Any more?
Hello,
Yes.
madam. Madam, good afternoon, madam.
Good afternoon, sir.
This is Dr. K. Praveen Kumar from Vagdevi College of Pharmacy, Warangal.
Yeah, please.
Such a informative session, madam. I think I am from pharmaceutical chemistry department, but now I am learn drug delivery systems. I am
Oh,
very interested,
oh, very good.
madam. I have one question, madam.
Yeah,
By
please.
using this nano suspension technology, if there is any drugs which are into market, madam?
Absolutely, sir. I have already showed one slide. There are n number of drugs which are there in the market, especially you can see,
Especially anti-cancer, madam.
yeah, anti-cancer drugs. They are in the pipeline, sir. In fact, especially for
Okay.
schizophrenia, antidepressant, anxiolytics. Like if you look into this olanzapine, paploridone, all these drugs are available in the form of a nanocrystal, sir. Okay,
Thank you,
anti-cancer
madam.
drugs they are in the pipeline, sir.
Okay.
Very
Thank you.
soon
Thank
they
you.
will come into the market.
Thank you.
Anyone?
Hello, good morning, ma'am.
Yeah. Good morning.
Yeah, I'm Mrs. Shilpa from Vageshwari Institute of Pharmaceutical Sciences, ma'am.
Yeah, Shilpa, go ahead.
Yeah, ma'am. Actually, we were speaking about LADMER, like liberation, absorption, distribution, metabolism, excretion, and response.
Yes.
So, where does this liberation state, like soon after the administration, ma'am? Where does this exactly liberation? What is if we are giving a drug by oral route?
Yeah.
So where exactly can we find the site of action for this liberation, ma'am? Where is the site exactly?
It has to be done in the mouth itself. There itself, it has to undergo liberation.
Okay.
And during the travel to the stomach.
Yeah, and so that means this liberation means it is something related to disintegration and dissolution of the dosage form.
Next step. Yeah. It is a part of that. It is a part of that. We can say it is a part of that.
Yeah, part of disintegration and dissolution process, disposition.
Yes.
Oh,
Not disposition. It is
yeah,
a,
yeah, disintegration and dissolution, ma'am.
yes.
Okay, and one more question I have, ma'am. Like while we were speaking about lead optimization before preclinical trials.
Yeah. Lead optimization will be before preclinical itself.
Yes, ma'am. So in the lead optimization, we were speaking about the molecule, about the drug molecule. This lead optimization, whether it takes place after the molecule, like we were discovery of the molecule, or after the complete formulation trial.
No, no, no. It is only before the formulation. Formulation you will decide in the clinical phase 1, phase 2 itself. You will decide the type of formulation which you want to take. Okay, so lead
Okay.
optimization is nothing but where you think that in the initial stages of our drug discovery, we have 1,000 molecule.
Yeah,
From
ma'am.
1,000 molecule, maybe we will have a lead of 10 molecules.
Okay.
These are 10 lead molecules. Now, these 10 lead molecules, we will do various characterization. We will study, in fact, what is isomerism, okay, all those chemistry point of view, because we need to know what is the enantiomeric form of that particular drug, okay,
Yeah.
simple
Okay,
analysis
ma'am.
we will do, toxicity we will do, all those things. So all the leads will not go to the druggable molecule. Only one will be the druggable molecule, and that particular druggable molecule, after thorough screening, evaluation in the preclinicals, then it comes to the clinical. In the clinical phase 1, now we will decide what will be the type of formulation, whether we have to give in the form of an injection or a tablet or a capsule. That is what is the formulation. That will be decided there.
Okay, like then there will be no influence of other formulation parameters on the
That's the reason.
molecule.
That's the reason now what the scientists are doing, the formulation scientists are, they are helping the drug discovery people in the middle of the discovery itself. Okay.
Okay.
Now that's the reason I said it is a biopharmaceutical hurdles. No, at the previous how it was a century ago, how it was, once I come up with a drug molecule, then I used to take the drug molecule, okay, and
Yeah.
find out what is the problem, all those things. But now the biopharmaceutical hurdles and the pharmacokinetic persons, Sutix persons, they are a part of now drug discovery itself. Okay.
Yeah, like things should go hand in hand. Otherwise, there will be a lot of wastage in, like if we face biopharmaceutical hurdles after certain phases of clinical trials, ma'am, then all these things may go in a waste, no?
Absolutely. That's the reason, no? Now the people are working together as a team and then say that definitely we have a very good, interesting molecule. So there itself, now they are classifying the drug molecule, whether it is a BCS 1, 2, or 3, or 4. So if, depending upon the classification, now they are coming with the formulation strategy there itself. Okay.
Yeah, and even the stability aspect comes there, ma'am.
Absolutely. It has to be taken there itself.
Yeah,
Okay.
because after the complete formulation and after a certain part of clinical trial, if we are facing a stability, if the stability is only a problem, then what will be the strategy, ma'am?
Yes, as you said, stability. Initially, we look the stability for the API as such.
Yeah,
Okay. Now, once the API is stable, that is fine. But we don't know the stability when it is changed into a formulation,
yeah, ma'am.
right? Because you know that in the formulation, apart from the drug or the API, we have various excipients which
Yes.
may affect the stability of the drug.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh-huh.
definitely, ma'am.
Therefore,
Definitely, they may
as a,
influence.
yes, therefore, as a formulation, also we need to do the stability studies.
Okay.
Okay. So
Okay.
it has to be done. It has to be done. Without doing the stability studies and all those things, again we can't take it, we can't bring it to the post marketing or post marketing is not possible.
Yeah, the stability study also should go hand in hand with the
Absolutely.
clinical trials and the drug discovery too.
Absolutely, absolutely. It has to be. It has to be.
Yeah, and ma'am, one more question about the nano suspension. Nano suspension, we were speaking also about the nanocrystals.
Yes.
So, ma'am, nano suspension, how it can be crystallized or how it can be converted to a nanocrystal?
Yeah, the technique is same. The technique is very same. What we are going to do in the nanocrystal means we are not changing the crystallinity. Here, it's very simple. What you are going to do, you need to precipitate the drug.
Okay.
You have to precipitate the drug. Use some organic solvent in such a way that and add it to a non-solvent system where it gets precipitates and the crystallinity of the drug is maintained.
Okay. Otherwise, in a nano suspension, as we have seen, as with that of the naringenin nano suspension, it has got converted to an
That
amorphous form.
absolutely it gets converted. It
Yeah.
gets converted. But not all the nanocrystals are converted to amorphism. Of course, in this particular study, we found that the total drug is crystalline drug is converted to amorphous. But in other work, what we found is that it is not converting to amorphous state. It is in the crystalline state itself. But at the same time, it is increasing the solubility because the crystal size has been decreased there.
Yeah, ma'am. That means is it that when the drug is more stable in its crystalline form, we can maintain it as a nanocrystal?
Yes, we can maintain.
Okay, okay, ma'am. And one more small question, ma'am. Sorry for the trouble. And when we were studying about the histopathological graph, when we were seeing, ma'am, we
Yes.
have seen that the naringenin nano suspension,
Yeah.
the histopathological graph was very similar to that of raloxifene, which is maintained as a standard.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, ma'am, can we here we are saying that it is something like equivalent. Can
Yes.
we prove that can we say that it could be more superior? Why can't it be more superior
It
to
can.
this?
The only thing is here, when it comes to equivalency, we say that we always compare. What is bioequivalency study?
Yeah, that is we are comparing to that of a
Exactly.
standard. Yeah.
Okay, we need to compare with the standard and say that it is on par equal with the standard, because the standard one is the one which is available in the market.
Okay, okay, okay,
Okay,
ma'am.
of course.
Like,
When, one more, actually, you should ask me like this, which is
yeah,
called as supra bioavailability. In fact,
yeah,
okay,
yeah, definitely,
what
ma'am.
is supra
Yeah.
bioavailability?
I was like
Bioavailability in the sense,
more bioavailable. It is
of
expressing more availability compared to that of a standard or reference.
the
Yeah.
innovator. Yes, okay. But here our intention is we want to compare only with the Reloxi as a standard, because this is a natural flavonoid. Okay,
Yeah.
and here you know that flavonoids as well as nutraceuticals, we can't say that it is the final one and a very standard one. Okay, but the main advantage of this particular flavonoids of the natural ones is that even though if we use in higher doses, it doesn't cause any toxic effects.
Okay, that means
Unlike
any side effects of the side effects associated with raloxifene,
this,
like in case of some its first pass metabolism or its irritation or something, will be overcome by
by
using naringin.
naringenin. In fact, raloxifene, it is going to cause a severe side effect which is called as venous thromboembolism.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, it causes blocking of your arteries. Okay, when it is taken
Okay.
continuously, also it is a very severe side effect. In fact, and in fact, what we found is that naringenin will not do in that. In fact, it is going to help in that condition also at the same time.
Okay. So in that way, like
Yes.
in terms of pharmacological action or in terms of side effects, we can say that this suspension has proved some certain better results compared to raloxifene, ma'am.
Yes, absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely.
that is what I wanted to know, ma'am.
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you very much, ma'am. It was really informative and a nice presentation, ma'am. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your good questions. Okay,
Thank you, ma'am.
fine. Yeah.
Ma'am, there are some other questions also. Can I?
Yeah, you can go ahead.
From the students. To analyze particle size, can SEM analysis is taken into prominence, or it is only TEM that has to be performed?
No, that's what I said. When it comes to the SEM, which is called as scanning electron microscopy, it is used for the what called as a clear for the systems where some particles are there. Okay, say for example, I have prepared an nanosuspension. So where the drug particles are there, I can see the drug particles, not by the naked eye, but even under the microscope. But when it comes to the microemulsion based system, SEM is not the correct one. We need to use what is called as a TEM, transmission electron microscopy, because this particular microemulsion based upon an oily based system. Yes or not? It is an oily based system. So the oil for oily based systems, we should go for TEM, transmission electron microscopy. Of course, people do report by using the scanning electron microscopy also, but if you look into the standard journals, they will not at all entertain to show the pictures by SEM. We have to use TEM. So in brief, what I can say is scanning electron microscopy, you can use for nano suspensions, you can use for what is called as a microparticles, nanoparticles, because we are using some polymeric materials we are using here. Am I clear to you? But in case of microemulsions, nanoemulsions, which are based upon a lipidic system, oil-based systems, we need to use transmission electron microscopy as a technique for knowing your topography, for knowing the particle size. Right? Got the clarity?
Yeah, ma'am. Some others are also asking about the definition of SPIP. I think they have not clearly heard about this.
What is that?
SPIP definition.
SPIP. SP.
Yeah, ma'am.
This is
Yeah.
called single pass intestinal permeability study.
Yeah.
SPIP. You can find the articles also. I will share my article to your sir also. You can
Okay,
ask him to share to the students.
Yeah, ma'am.
Okay,
So one last question, ma'am.
Yeah.
That is Priyanka. She's asking about, ma'am, you said when dose is high, we can go for nano suspensions.
Yes.
But nano suspensions deliver only limited dose of drug. No?
Limited?
Dose of drug.
No, no. So when you look into this particular decision tree as per this particular advanced delivery system, how to select an approach? Okay. So one more point which we need to consider is the dose. Why I said dose? Because flavonoids, these are plant-based materials. Okay. And they need to be taken in large doses.
Yeah.
Yes or not? So
Yeah.
for that particular high dose of drugs, better is the nano suspension. I can't go for an emulsion-based approach there.
So there will be no limited dose. I think.
No limited dose. If the dose is very high, you can use this particular nano suspension as an approach.
Yeah.
If the dose means, what I can say is, if the dose is less also you can use. If the dose is more also you can use.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh, okay, ma'am.
That is the answer.
That's all, ma'am.
Yeah.
I don't know. Is there anyone to ask any questions? Okay, ma'am. No one is asking the questions.
Okay, fine.
That's so clear and informative, ma'am. Thank you so much. And from our management side, I want to thank you again. I would like to take this chance to inform you that our principal, staff, and management of Dhanvantari Educational Society,
Yeah.
we are feeling this as the most worthwhile experiences. And it was a most outstanding webinar series presentation from your side. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you. Have a nice day.
Thank you, ma'am.
Bye. I'm leaving the session. Okay.
Okay, ma'am. I would like to thank our management for also conducting such a webinar series,
Okay.
for gaining knowledge from your researchers. We are very thankful.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Have a nice day. Bye.
Thank you, ma'am.